Take a look at this screen here. You will notice it says Mongolia 27 years ago. That was when I was first called to Mongolia. I was 20 years old and I had just graduated from PUC, and Jasmine, Julie, and Joanne's parents will know this quite well because they apparently harped on this for a long time with their kids. But I was a triple major and I graduated in 3 years. So I don't advise anybody do that, and I don't advise parents to push their children to do that. It's not a sane schedule. At PUC, which I just spoke, I was there earlier this week, apparently I still hold the record, 40 units in 1 quarter. Yeah, don't do that. I slept about 2 hours a day. It was not conducive to my health. Okay, so when I was called to Mongolia, it was really bizarre because the circumstances were not a typical call. Initially, I was supposed to go to Uzbekistan. And for those of you guys who are au courant with the fall of communism and the devastation of the Soviet Union, it was one of the former Soviet satellite countries. You know, all those stans, right? Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan. There's a bunch of stans. Well, Uzbekistan had a very large former Korean community. You know, they had emigrated there many years ago, and so they had second and third generation Koreans. So they were, you know, a lot of Korean pastors were going there, and the capital there is Tashkent. So I was scheduled to go there for 2 years to serve as a missionary. And I was going to be working with a multi-denominational group, teaching English as our, you know, way of reaching the people with the gospel. Well, I was getting ready to go. It was only a few months left. And then all of a sudden, they found out I was an Adventist. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. We don't want any Adventists on our team. Oh, we can't deal with you and your special Sabbath issues and your special food issues. Sorry, but no thank you. And this was right before graduation, so everything just fell apart. And I was kind of left there thinking, okay, God, you know, what's going on here? I took, you know, a huge, you know, step forward to say I would give you 2 years of my life. You know, this was a huge variation from my plan. I was your typical type A personality, you know, I had my whole life planned out for 10 years, and I was going to go into international law and become a diplomat. And, you know, I had all this planned out, and I had felt touched to go into mission work and to give God a couple years of my life before heading down that road. And then all of a sudden, it fell apart. So I was a little upset, you know, needless to say, like, God, hello, you know, what's going on here? You know, this is not part of the plan. Well, God works in truly mysterious ways. And right when that call fell apart, I got contacted by Adventist Frontier Missions. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar with it, they are a self-supporting ministry out of Berrien Springs, and they send people to the unpeopled places. So basically, anywhere that has no Adventist church, period. They'll go and they church plant. So that's a very theological and, you know, word, and you heard this in seminary. But basically, the concept is to start a church from scratch. Well, Mongolia, post-communism as of 1991, had a 0 Adventist population and almost a 0 Christian population. There were no Christians. There were no concept of Christianity. They were atheists, traditionalists, shamanists, Buddhists. There were no Christians. So when they contacted me, I said, well, Lord, you know, I don't know about this. This is an entirely different story. There's only 2 things I knew about Mongolia back then, and it turns out that they were both wrong. Okay, so my 3 majors, English, history, and French. Okay, in history, you know, I loved world history, particularly Asian history, but you know what? The Western world has deceived us. The great warlord is not Genghis Khan. It is Chinggis. It is Chinggis. We have been taught incorrectly for millennia, you know, okay. So it is Chinggis Khan. The other thing, anybody into Mongolian barbecue, Mongolian beef? That is not Mongolian. It is Chinese, okay? So we have been deceived there too. True Mongolian barbecue, ask Danny about it, it's pretty gross. They stick an entire goat into a big hole with burning, steaming hot rocks. They cover it up, and then they tear meat off of that and they put it on a plate. Now, you know, interestingly enough, the only seasoning they have is salt, and then there's still like goat hair, fur stuck all over the meat. I guess they're using that as a toothpick for after you're done eating or something, but that is Mongolian barbecue. So if that hasn't turned you guys off of meat, I don't know what will. But okay, so those are the only 2 things I knew about Mongolia. There was no communication there. I had no idea what to expect. So I tossed out a Gideon test to the Lord, and I said, all right, Lord, if you're serious about sending me there, AFM is self-supporting. That means you have to raise all your own funds. I said, Lord, you're going to have to do this for me because, I can't fundraise. I'm a terrible fundraiser. I couldn't even sell Girl Scout cookies when I was young. My parents had to buy all of them and sell them at work. I started up a lemonade stand, and I actually ended up in the negative. I don't know what happened. I think I just gave everything away. So I'm terrible at sales, couldn't do it. And so I figured this will be my way out. If I can't raise the funds for this, then I will have a legitimate excuse not to go. Well, scarily enough, the funds came in so quickly that AFM was just floored. Usually it takes a year or two to raise all the funds to launch a missionary. And for me, it took 2 months, and all the money came in. And so I said, all right, God, I give in, I'll go. And I took off to Mongolia right after I turned 21. And I had to go through Beijing, and I took a plane. Let's see, which button? The top button? Point this way. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I took off from Beijing. That plane is an old Antonov. It's a retired plane from the Aeroflot Russian fleet. So basically what Russia didn't want anymore, they gave to Mongolia. And Mongolia kind of made do with whatever planes they had. Well, this was taking off from Beijing on August 31st, 1992. And it was really hot in Beijing. It was like this is Celsius, so like 85, 90 degrees, humidity. And so I was lugging all this stuff. The big joke was I was, moving to Mongolia not knowing what to expect. So for those of you who are old enough to remember how your parents moved to America, they left in imingabang. Do you guys know what that is? They're called immigration bags. You unzip it and it grows. You unzip it again and it grows. I mean, you can fit a grown adult into one of these bags. Well, I had 5 of those, and it was loaded with everything. I had 50 pounds of rice, 50 pounds of wheat, 50 pounds of beans. I had no idea what to expect there. I didn't even know if they would have food, whether I could purchase anything. And get this, I took a whole bunch of stuff that ended up being useless. I took a fax machine. I'm like, why? I don't know, because I had no phone. There were no phone lines, so I couldn't even use the fax machine. Plus, it was 110, and Mongolia is 220, but I didn't know. I had no idea what to expect, so I have all this stuff. 5 bags, this huge carry-on, and my guitar. I get on the plane, and the first thing I notice is the seat is not bolted to the floor. It moves. And I'm like, excuse me, I think there's something wrong with my seat. She's like, oh, no, that's okay. All the seats are like that. You'll be fine. It's like a rocking chair. So like every time, I shift, the chair moves forward. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is the weirdest plane I've ever been on. And then there's the AC unit dripping water on me like a faucet the whole time. And I'm like, oh, this is really crazy. And so I'm waiting for the flight, waiting some more. We're already like an hour late. And finally I called the flight attendant again. I said, excuse me, what's the problem here? Why are we not going? She's like, oh, we're having a little bit of trouble getting the emergency door closed. And I just kind of looked at her, I'm like, why was the emergency door open? Is it supposed to be open? And she's like, it's okay, don't worry, they're working on it. 30 minutes later, still nothing, and finally I'm like, excuse me, that flight attendant probably hated me. Like, excuse me. They're like, is anything going on? What's going to happen? Are we going to take it? Yeah, don't worry about it. They're fixing the door right now. And I looked around the corner, and they were welding it shut. Welding, guys, as in like permanent closure. And I thought, Lord, please, please, please don't let us need this emergency exit on this flight. And after they were done welding, these guys with the big mask, they're walking off the plane, and I'm just crying inside. I'm like, I don't want to die. And we finally start backing out of the gate. I'm like, okay, very nervous, but very anxious and eager. And so we start going. Now, most planes, they get to the runway, they speed up, and then they lift off, right? That's what you come to expect. Well, this plane got to the runway, started speeding up, and then it slowed down and turned around and came back to the gate. And I thought, oh my goodness, now what? What is the problem now? So I called the flight attendant, and I'm like, so what's going on now? She's like, oh, the plane is too heavy to lift off. We need to empty some of the cargo. And I'm thinking, it's my rice, it's all that rice. Well, fortunately, after they unloaded everything, and I said, well, what's going to happen to this luggage? They said, it'll come in on the next flight. I said, well, when is the next flight? Well, we don't know. And I thought, oh my goodness, there goes my rice. And I was just praying, Lord, please make sure my luggage stays on this flight so I can get it. Well, you can see that we did land safely. But you'll notice that plane is in the middle of a tarmac, okay? And this is how the planes landed, because there's no jet bridge. You don't get off the plane and walk into a terminal. You get off the plane, you walk down, and then you go to the cargo hold and you get your own luggage. So I had no idea, and I'm thinking, all right, you know, the minute we landed, remember, Beijing was super hot. I was in shorts and a t-shirt. Everyone started getting coats on. And I thought, these people are all weird. I mean, wool coats, cashmere coats, mink coats. And I'm like, it is so hot. What are they thinking? The door opens, -10 degrees. And I was shorts and a t-shirt, like, oh my goodness, I'm going to die before I even get inside the airport. And I look, the airport building is about 1 kilometer away. So here I am with my huge carry-on and my guitar, and I'm running for the building. I'm like, forget my rice and my luggage, and I just need to get inside. But the building was not heated. So it was almost as cold inside as it was outside. When I got inside and I realized how cold it was, I was so discouraged and so sad and feeling helpless. I just kind of crumpled to the ground and I started crying. But you know what? The tears were freezing on my cheeks. So it's like, oh, like ice off of my face. And these 2 boys come up and they're like, oh, you didn't speak the language. And they're like, you're back. We will help you. I'm like, yes, please help me. And they're like, dollar? I'm like, as many dollars as you want. And they're willing to go out and get my luggage, but they don't know what it looks like, right? So I had to get my carry-on on again and the backpack again, and we ran back out to the plane. I pointed out my luggage. Praise the Lord, all 5 pieces came. We came out, and that is how I landed in Mongolia. And then here, oops, wrong button. Here is what I arrived to. Just dismal, gray, brown, old, falling apart. And yet this is everywhere in the former Soviet Union looked like this. If you go, even now, if you look at pictures of Pyongyang, North Korea, they have that big square, where they do their military marching stuff, and and then all the buildings look like this. And I don't think that any of the infrastructure has changed since the 50s or 60s when the Soviet Union came in and built everything. The slide sets have so much rust that you stain your clothes. It was a really dreary, dreary existence. Now this is inside the city, and then once you go to the outskirts of the city, it looks more like Mongolia. You guys see those little tent-like structures? For those of you who've ever watched National Geographic, they are not yurts. Yurts are the Russian name for them. They are called gers. And these gers are the traditional nomadic homes that the Mongolians live in, because you can unpack and pack and move off whenever you feel like it. But the thing is, once they've settled in the city, they're not ideal for long-term habitation. They're not warm, so they have to burn coal, and nowadays many people who are so poor they can't afford coal, they burn garbage, plastic, rubber, tires, and so they're polluting the atmosphere. Now, when you go out to these communities, there's no streets or signs or directions, and there's no transportation. So basically, you ride horses. So that's me in my Mongolian dell, wandering around these Ger communities. Now, even though I've got transportation now, I have no idea where I'm going. So I basically let the horse have its lead, and okay, go off, go somewhere, and it will inevitably go towards the well. And I thought, yes, this is a good place, woman at the well, that type of thing. I could go out here. And so we always ended up at the well. And that's where, I would start, meeting people and things like that. But it was frigidly cold. So this is a big problem everywhere we go. And Mongolia was so poor. I mean, so poor. When I landed, most people, unless they had ration cards, they couldn't even buy food. Unfortunately for foreigners, we're not given ration cards, so we have to shop at the black market where everything is even more expensive. Can anybody tell from this picture what that is supposed to be? Because this was like hallelujah moment in Mongolia. That was the invention of toilet paper. They had no toilet paper in Mongolia. They used newspaper. And when they finally invented toilet paper, if you look carefully, there are more holes than paper. So you have to wrap like 50 times in order to get full coverage, okay? Because you don't want to get a spot that wasn't covered completely. But I was so excited that toilet paper was invented that I actually took a picture of this and sent it home to everyone. They couldn't understand why toilet paper was such a big deal. You just have to go without toilet paper for a while, and then you will realize how amazing an invention it is. This is the Mongolian monetary bill. Those are called tugriks. There's 5, 10, 20. 20 was the biggest one back then. There's smaller ones, 3, 1, and then they had coins called mung. And, the money was so valueless. I can't even imagine how they could afford to print it. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. there's a story which I don't think is fiction. I think it's real, but people have turned it into a joke of sorts, that a man went to the bank to get money out to do something, and then he had to bring a wheelbarrow to put all the money in, because the denominations are so small. So he took this wheelbarrow full of money, and he was going, and he got robbed on the way. The thing was, though, they emptied the wheelbarrow, threw all the money out, and stole the wheelbarrow. That's how valueless the money is. Now, granted, I actually had to take a backpack to change money from US dollars into Tugriks to buy anything. I'd stuff it in my pockets, and just because the money was so valuable. You need a wad like this just to buy some potatoes. You need another wad to buy a cabbage. It was crazy. Now, the biggest problem in Mongolia was the drunks. Mongolians like to say, oh, the Russians, they teach us to drink, and now we are better than them. And I'm thinking, I don't think that's anything to brag about. But they are. They drink and drink and drink hard liquor, and they drink it like water. They're drinking 120 proof vodka. It's toxic enough to kill you, I think. I can't imagine anyone can drink that, but they drink it because it's cheap. They make, distilled liquors very cheap in Mongolia, and so there are drunks everywhere. Now, I have a particular abhorrence for alcohol and drinking and the violence that ensues, because my father was not a very nice person, and he was abusive, and when he drank, he got more abusive. So I remember the beatings and the way he treated my mom, and so I just, I see a drunkard and I just automatically just get paralyzed, frightened to death. And yet everywhere in Mongolia there were these drunkards. Now, the problem is, if the drunkards are just over there and they mind their own business, there's no problem. But for some reason, it was like a magnet. And I will tell you this, with spiritual warfare, Satan is not stupid. Far from it. He was once, remember, the right-hand man for God. He is so smart, he uses your weakest points. And he knew this was my weakness. And so he constantly harassed me with drunks. On a regular basis, maybe once a week, sometimes more often, I was assaulted or mugged by a drunkard. And it got to the point where I was petrified. I couldn't even go outside. One time I went to the market to buy potatoes, and an old man came and just started beating me with an umbrella. I still have a scar on the back of my head here. And I was screaming for help. Nobody came to my assistance, and he was yelling that I was his runaway daughter-in-law because I look Mongolian, okay? And so, every time we'd go out, my two mission colleagues, Brad and Kathy Jolly, they're white. They're just, Anglo-Saxon Americans, straight out of WASP community, They never got bothered at all, because you don't want to mess with foreigners. But they don't think I'm a foreigner. They think I'm Mongolian. So everywhere I went, I would have another problem and another problem. And on the bus one time, a young drunk man decided I was going to be his girlfriend and started dragging me all over the bus, and I was, fighting him off. Nobody was lifting a finger. They're all just kind of looking the other direction. And finally, one grandmother with her cane, she kind of wobbled to the front and whacked the bus driver, yelled at him to stop the bus. And then she whacked a couple other people and told them to throw him off. I was so grateful. I just kind of clung to that grandmother and cried. And, she kind of thought that I was, maybe mentally disabled, because I look Mongolian, I look normal, but I can't talk. And so I'm like, oh, I was just crying and just whatever. But in any case, she saved me that day. And unfortunately, it continued all the time. And then finally, one day, the drunk across the hall mistook his apartment for mine. And since my door was locked, he thought his wife was locking him out. And in his drunken fury and rage, he kicked the door, punched a hole through it, broke down, and started beating me again. And I was so scared. I'm thinking, how can I not be safe even inside my own apartment? And I was doing everything I could to fight him off, but I hate to tell you this, but drunkards are not happy drunkards. They get violent and they're strong. And I got my broomstick and I was trying to hit him, and I realized I was not going to make it. So instead I started banging on the ceiling, because Brad and Kathy lived upstairs. And they were wondering, they're like, what is Joanne doing down there anyway? But I kept banging. I hit him and bang, he was dragging me out the hallway. And finally Brad came running downstairs, and he saw what happened, and he called the neighbors, and they managed to get him out. I replaced the door with a steel door, but I was petrified after that. I didn't even want to go outside. And Brad kept trying to coax me to go out. He's like, it's okay, this isn't going to happen again, and I'll go with you. I was so scared, literally. And then he's like, come on, Joanne, you didn't come all the way out to Mongolia to evangelize to your closet, right? And I was like, oh, the closet doesn't hit me. I was horrified. And the biggest problem was, remember, I came out here to share about God's love, and yet I hated these people. How do you share the gospel message of love to people that you abhor? I detested them. I hated them. I'm like, no, you don't deserve salvation. You guys all deserve to go to hell. That was the way I felt because I was so personally hurt and shocked by them. Finally, Brad convinced me to go out. And, for the next couple days, everything was okay. And then one day, we went out to one of those Ger communities to meet someone. I went with Kathy. Now, Kathy is very petite. She's probably not even 5 feet tall, and she's very slim, very blonde. And we went, and we're waiting at the bus stop because that's as far as we knew to go. And the people were supposed to come and meet us. And we waited, and we waited. Nobody was coming. It was very cold, and I'm thinking, we need to just go. And I was telling Kathy, she's like, oh, well, let's just wait a little bit more. They may just be late. I'm like, it's like 2 hours. Come on, Kathy, let's just go. And right then, 4 drunk young men decided to come over and start up a conversation. I just kept trying to move away, backing away. And finally, they're like, oh, you're going to come with me. And at that point, I didn't speak Mongolian. So I'm just like, no. I'm like, don't touch me. Like smack, smack, smack. And then Kathy kept saying, Joanne, calm down. Don't get violent. If we react harshly, they're going to get worse. And I'm like, I don't think it can get any worse, And she's like, it's okay, just let's stay calm. And we just kept trying to move away. And finally, they just grabbed me and started dragging me down an alley. And Kathy was clinging to my other arm. Okay, but 2 girls against 4 guys, what are the odds that we're going to be able to fight them off? We both got dragged down an alley, completely deserted. Nobody was there. And then they just started ripping my jacket off and kicking. I was so scared. I just started kicking and biting and screaming and doing everything I could. And I thought, we're gonna get killed. I'm gonna die here. And I was so scared. I couldn't even say a coherent prayer. I just remember saying, Lord help us, Lord help us, Lord help us. That was all that was repeated in my head. And I thought, I just want to go home. And Kathy was telling me to stay calm. But remember, they're not doing anything to her. And I'm like, I don't think I can stay calm at this point. So I was doing everything I could to fight back. But 4 strong guys, there was just no chance. And then at the last minute, these guys, they just turned white as ghosts and threw me down on the ground and just took off running. And I thought, oh, the police must have come. Somebody must be here. And I looked everywhere. There wasn't anyone in sight. There wasn't even a dog. There wasn't a bird, nothing. And I realized then and there that God had sent his guardian angels there to protect me. When I got back home, you would think that would have been the last straw, right? I mean, for me, as a person, I said, that's it. I am so done, Lord. I've paid my dues. I've tried. This is only 2 months into my stay, and I said, I can't do it anymore. I admit defeat. I will go. And then, as I was struggling and I was praying about this, an incredible sensation came over me, and I realized, wait a minute, hold on a second. If God can protect me under those kind of circumstances, he can protect me under any circumstances. And I said, all right. Okay, Lord, we're going to give it a shot. And I said, however, you need to equip me to deal with this. And here I am, I'm thinking like, a weapon, or something, a bodyguard. But instead, God gave me a better tool. Now, when I went to Mongolia, remember, I didn't know a single word of Mongolian. It's a very complicated language. However, I had some interesting assets. I had studied Russian because I was planning on going to Uzbekistan. So I could read the Cyrillic alphabet. I don't know if any of you can make sense of that, but to me, I could read it. I didn't understand what any of it meant, but at least I could read signs. Now, the other interesting factor is that Mongolian is an Ural-Altaic language group, which is the same as Korean and Japanese. So the grammar system, the syntax, is the same as Mongolian and Korean. So because I grew up speaking Korean, I had another advantage there. On top of that, I had studied foreign language, so I admit that I had linguistic capability. But Mongolian is such a complex language. It's crazy. It's impossible to learn. And remember, it took 2 months, and I was barely saying "sambeno," hello, "bayitla," thank you, "bayite," goodbye. That was the extent of my vocabulary. But you know what? The spiritual gifts, as are outlined in 1 Corinthians, are still in existence today. And God still dispenses them graciously, generously, as needed. Because within 3 months, I was speaking Mongolian fluently and teaching Bible in Mongolian. I went from 0 to fluent. Okay? No matter how linguistically talented you are, this is not possible. This is the gift of tongues. And you know, because of that, I was able to survive. The next time I got assaulted, I just started yelling at him in Mongolian and asking people to help get this crazy man away from me. And that the ability to communicate made a world of difference. 3 months, guys. You cannot learn a language in 3 months. This was God's special gift to me to help me. Now, I would love to say that I never had a problem with a drunk again, but unfortunately that was not the case. On a regular basis, almost every week, I was assaulted, beaten, or mugged by drunks. It was crazy. My brother was trying to make light of it. He's like, hey, Joanne, you just take that sign off your back. You must be walking around with the sign, just mug me. And I'm like, because nobody else had this problem. And I said, no, that's not it, and you have to know it. Satan knows your weakest points, and he's not going to let go of that until he makes you fall. And so I said, okay, Lord, that's my weakness, but I've got you on my side, so I will endure. And when he gave me the gift of tongues and I was able to communicate in Mongolian, it made, like I said, a world of difference. And so from there, I started a little Bible study home group. Just a couple people at a time, 1 or 2 members. And you know what's amazing here too? When I was growing up, everybody told me I should study Spanish. You go to school in Southern California, Espanol, everybody needs to speak Spanish. I say habla Espanol. No, but I really wanted to study French. And my mom's like, oh, French is such a useless language. I said, no, c'est la langue la plus belle du monde. It's the most beautiful language in the world. No, that was in a different generation. You really need to study Spanish. No, Mom, I want to study French. Well, I won. And so I studied French for 4 years in high school. I went to France at our Adventist school as an exchange student. And I even earned my Alliance Française, my French teaching certification. And then I came back and I finished my degree in French. And of course my mom's like, oh, that's lovely, but what on earth are you going to do with French now in Southern California? And I said, well, I don't know, it's a beautiful language. And she's like, whatever, she's very practical. Usually I am too, but I love the French language. Well, look at how God works. When I was in Mongolia, I needed to have a visa. You don't get missionary visas to work in post-communist countries. So I ended up teaching French at the Foreign Language University. How's that for a real weird tweak in our plans? And then on top of that, one of my first students came to me, wanted to become French. She was very smart. She's like, oh, if I get to be, real close to my teacher, I should have an advantage over everybody else. She's like, can I visit your home? Can I come visit you? Can you teach me more Mongolian? I said, well, sure, but you know what? I only have one French book here. It's called La Sainte Bible. She's like, what's that? I said, oh, the Bible? It's the best storybook in the world. And she's like, oh, okay. And so I started teaching her French with the French Bible, and she joined this study group that continued to grow. These are mostly all of my former students, and it continued to grow to the point where we didn't fit in my living room anymore, and we had to rent a building. What happened? Did I turn it off? Oh, there we go. Okay. So we ended up having to rent a building for church after this because it grew to the point where we had outgrown the seams of my apartment. So no longer a home church. Danny, I don't know if you remember this place. This is the Red Cross building where the second one after that we rented. And we rented this hall every Sabbath. And then in 1993, in October, we had our first ever baptism. Now the young lady in blue was my French student. She was the first baptized Adventist member in Mongolia. Now, those of you who are old enough to recognize him, that is Elder Bob Folkenberg Sr. He was the then General Conference president, and he flew all the way to Mongolia to conduct the first ever baptisms. But the baptisms didn't stop. The next baptism had another group of 5 or 6. This young lady, Tamara, is still like a little sister to me. I'm sure Danny will remember her. We used to go biking together, hiking together, everything. And, another 5, and then another 7. And then, this one is a very important date. October 11th, 1997, there was a group of 17 young people ready to get baptized, but they were waiting. And they were waiting. They were prepared during that summer, but they were waiting for me because I was not in Mongolia at that time. And the reason was I had actually gone out on furlough to get married and then to Pastor John, who was the Sacramento youth pastor, and then we went back to Mongolia. That was why he stopped pastoring in Sacramento in 97. So, I don't know, does anybody remember these dates? See, Judy and Deborah and Annie, they need to be here. They'll remember. Okay, so we got married and we came back to Mongolia. They were waiting for us to get baptized because this was a real key moment in Mongolian history, because we also had the official charter signing for the church. So on October 11, 1997, Mongolia was officially chartered as an Adventist church. So apparently our work was done. You know, when we got married and we went back to Mongolia, we did something special. We got married again. And we did it Mongolian style, because we really wanted for them to understand what a Christian wedding was about. They had no concept of a wedding that was being blessed by God. You know, they just go and they sign a registry in the office, or they have some weird Buddhist rituals, or they just all go out and get drunk. And so what we did was, even though we're dressed in Mongolian finery, we held a Christian ceremony. So we were the first married Adventist couples in Mongolia, but we set the example, a role model for them to follow, and they continue to do so. So that was 27 years ago. Up until 1998 was when we actually left. So for a year after the church founding, we established the church, we wrote the charters and all of this, and then the General Conference missionaries came in, we turned the baton over, and our job as church planters was done. But you know, by that point, I had spent 5 years of my life in Mongolia. That's a huge chunk for a 21-year-old. And I realized I'm never going to lose this. They're always going to have a place in my heart. So I told my husband, I said, someday we have to go back, you know. And he's like, yeah, you know, when we retire, let's go back to Mongolia and help and work out some more. But in the meantime, we went back occasionally for short-term mission trips. And then about 3 years ago, you know, I had gone there for a big evangelistic crusade, and this is how much the church has grown since then. Before we get to the church, if you recognize this from pictures, we actually have an airport now. I'm just so excited. It's a real airport. You know, it has a jet bridge, it has a luggage carousel, and it has carts. Hey, what more can you ask, right? We should never complain about airport service in the States, because compared to Mongolia, I mean, we live in amazing places. Look at how much the city has changed. We went from that drab gray and brown and dirty areas to look at all the color. But unfortunately, with all this development comes smog and air pollution. That skyscraper there was actually built by Samsung Construction Company. So Korea has invested a lot of money into Mongolia. This was actually a good day. Mongolia's air quality now is so bad, it has surpassed Beijing and all of the cities in India to be the worst polluted capital city in the world. You know, in Korea, they're always talking about the fine particle dust, and they're wearing their masks, and oh, this is terrible. They're at about 85 microns. In my apartment, on a good day, it's 200. And that's with my air purifiers going. And so for my kids, they're like, oh, Mom, look, it's orange. It's not red today. They're all excited because the air quality has dropped from red to orange. You know, on the rare occasion it turns green, we're like, and then it goes right back up to red. And this is on a good day. Outside, it's at 560, 600. I mean, it's crazy. When we're wearing our masks, you know, it's really great at blocking out the fine dust, but it also blocks out oxygen. So do you know how hard it is to breathe? You know, we're wheezing, climbing up our 9 flights of stairs because our elevator's broken again. You know, so it's a hard place to be, which is why we don't want to be in the city. The money has changed. It went from the highest bill being 20 tugriks to now 20,000, but we still need a backpack to change money because the value has fallen that much again. So if you look at the numbers, 20,000 tugriks, that's only about $8. So it doesn't go far when you're trying to buy something. The baptisms have continued. You know, we've been having a lot of mission teams coming in, and it is written, Pastor John Bradshaw, they came in with a huge team 2 springs ago. And this is May, but it's -2. And so it's crazy cold there, but they're still, look at her face. She's coming out of freezing cold water, and she's so happy. The church continues to grow, the baptisms continue. And look at this, we had to rent a hall for 2,000 people for the evangelistic meetings. Now, after that, we have our Pathfinder groups. These kids are so cute. And you know what's amazing? If you look really carefully though, none of those have matching patches because they're all donated uniforms. So we have Lake Union Conference, Southern California Conference, Eastern, Western, you know, Washington Conference. They're from all over the world because they're donated. But these guys at least had matching colors. Everyone on the aisle, they had white and blue, red and maroon. I mean, it was crazy, but they're so proud to be a Pathfinder. And look at how much we have grown since then. We now have, from my one small home church of 2-3 people to 22 churches. We have over 2,400. The most recent baptism I apparently heard is we're now at almost 2,500 baptized members. 6 ordained pastors, 5 Pathfinder companies, a whole horde of translated Spirit of Prophecy, 10 foreign families working as missionaries, and 1 small church school. Now, that is going to bring us back to what happened to Mongolia for the future. My husband, after we left here, he ended up going with me to Mongolia. He came back, he studied, he ended up becoming a dentist, but he was an Air Force dentist. So this is my husband, that's my son. This was taken about 3 years ago. And we lived a very happy and comfortable life in the military. Everywhere we went, we continued to minister. I mean, we were youth pastor in San Antonio, and Guam, Japan, Korea. Everywhere we were stationed, we continued to minister. But Mongolia was still in the back of our hearts. But the military life is really nice. And if you know anything about it, if you serve 20 years, you get a very cush pension plan. 50% of your highest salary for the rest of your life. Okay, so I was aiming for that. So when he hit Lieutenant Colonel, I'm like, yes, okay, we're almost there. Keep it going, keep it going. Those are my 2 girls and my youngest daughter there. The 2 older ones are now in college. And I said, okay, honey, only 5 more years. He hit Lieutenant Colonel. That's his colonel over there. He was the commanding officer. He was getting promoted. He was going to become the dental commanding officer for the base. And we're like, all right, all right, all right. And then knock, 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 the Spirit came calling. And we received a call to return to Mongolia. And I said, oh, Lord, sorry, thank you, but we're going to pause on that. Give us 5 more years, okay? I said, we always plan to retire and go to Mongolia. That's not a problem. However, not now. And, the knocking got louder. Knock, 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 knock. And I'm like, God, come on, cut me some slack here. 5 more years, okay? All we need is 5, and then we can go off anywhere because we have this pension plan. With this pension plan, we can be tent-making missionaries anywhere in the world and not have to worry about a salary. And yet, the knocking got louder and louder. And so I tossed out my Gideon fleeces again. My Gideon tests. Here, Gideon only tosses out 2. I tossed out 4. And I was thinking, anything I can do to come up with an excuse to not go, right? So the 4 tests that I sent out for the Lord were almost impossible. Literally, I thought they could never come to fruition. I did it on purpose, thinking, well, if one of them doesn't work, then I have a valid excuse. I'll say, okay, Lord, see, it didn't work out. I can't go right now. My goodness. All 4 tests came back affirmative within a span of weeks. And yet I still thought I did not want to go. And so finally, my youngest daughter, who was like 6 or 7, she came up to me and I was so embarrassed. She said, Mommy, you do realize if you keep running away from God, He is going to send a big fish to swallow you. And then you're going to stink after spending 3 days in the belly of a fish. And I just looked at her, and she's like, and then, Mommy, I'm not going to hug and kiss you anymore because you're going to be too smelly. I cried. I was so embarrassed, to be shamed by a 7-year-old. We had taught them, you need to live by God's will. We will do what God tells us to do. Let's live a faithful life. And here we were running away. And it took her threatening me with a fish to make us realize, oh, wow, we cannot do this. So we had a big family powwow. And we had a vote. We said, you guys realize what this is going to mean. The younger ones, you guys have to move to Mongolia with us. There's no school. You're going to be homeschooled. You have no friends, Are you guys all willing to do this? And all 4 of my kids said yes. So this is the reason why I was called back to Mongolia, is to establish a new school. Because I told you we have 1 small church school, but it's an elementary school up to 5th grade. And then after that, when the kids go off into the world, they start getting lost. And so they end up not coming to church anymore. They leave their families. They end up living lives that even they realize are not according to God's will. So the mission president there called me back. He's like, Joanne, you have to come now and start the school. You have all the necessary skills. You're a teacher, administrator, principal for years. And then on top of that, you speak fluent Mongolian. And on top of that, he's like, you're crazy enough to do it. And so right now, we have a 5-project school going up. It's not just a school. It's the new International Academy. I was talking to Julie earlier. I'm like, we need teachers, okay? And then we have a vocational school and an agriculture center, because remember, you've got 7-8 months of winter. You don't get a very long growing season. So we're going to have huge greenhouse systems set up to produce food for our schools and to sell. And then we have a wellness center, because the wellness center, Mongolia is still a developing country. They have all of the illnesses of third world countries. But thanks to Pizza Hut, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King, and all of America's wonderful fast food inventions, we now also have all the chronic ailments of the modern world: heart disease, hypertension, diabetes, cancer. So a wellness center is going to be key to reaching out to people. And then the last one is the Gateway Recreation and Resort. We're going to run an actual tourist camp because we need that to generate income to continue operating the schools. We have to be really practical. We can't run on donations for the rest of their years, right? So the goal is to get things self-sustaining. The initial donations and offerings will build the school, and then from then on, we're going to be operating on our own budgets. So this is the land that we purchased. It looks quite barren, but we're going to start tree planting soon. And the land that we purchased is right in the middle of a new development. So the government is eager for us to get going on this. We received the stamp permit right when we needed it, and then this is what the school is eventually going to look like. So if you look at the structure of the school, it should be familiar, right? They look like gears. We're trying to be as culturally appropriate as possible. So the campus will look like concrete nomadic gears. And so we're going to build, phase 1 starts this summer, so we desperately need your prayers. We're going to build the school, a dorm, the cafeteria, and then staff housing. And obviously we can't do anything right now because it's still frozen solid, it's permafrost. But with the spring thaw in May, we're going to start our construction. The verse that Eugene read for us earlier is one of my all-time favorite verses because we always forget that God has very specific plans for us. And they are always perfect plans. We're the ones that go awry. You know, we end up going off on different trajectories and we mess the plans up. But if we remember that the plans that God has for us will give us the perfect hope and perfect future, then we won't have any problems. So please remember to pray for Mongolia. If you are interested in any type of mission work, I'm going to leave some brochures with Danny. You can get that information from him. And we are actively recruiting teachers to open the school next fall. So thank you for allowing me to have this time to share with you guys.